Dust lifted in pale curtains around Lillian Parker's wagon wheels as she stirred her old mare along the main road of Great Bend, Kansas. Her pulse knocked hard against her ribs with raw, desperate hope. This was the last town. After this, she had nothing left to sell and nowhere left to turn. The summer heat of 1878 pressed down without mercy on wooden storefronts lining the street. Their sun-bleached faces told stories of brutal winters and harder lives, not unlike her own these past months since her father died and left her buried under his debts, with only the quilts her mother had stitched before consumption claimed her 3 years prior. She had been moving from town to town, ranch to ranch, selling those pieces of fabric art one by one, watching her inheritance shrink with each sale until only 7 remained. They lay folded with care in the wagon bed beneath a canvas tarp, shielded from the punishing sun. Lillian was 22 years old, unmarried, running dry on options in a world that showed no mercy to women alone. Her hands, calloused from gripping reins across too many miles, tightened on the leather as she spotted a large ranch at the edge of town. Its fences stood straight and well kept. Its buildings wore fresh paint that spoke of prosperity. The sign at the entrance read, "Yates Ranch." Something cinched tight in her chest, a knot of fear braided with determination as she turned the wagon down the long drive toward the main house. A man stood on the porch, tall, broad through the shoulders. He wore a dark vest over a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms browned by sun and labor. He watched her approach with an expression she could not decipher from that distance. One hand rested easy on the porch railing, as though time meant nothing to him. As she drew nearer, details sharpened. Dark hair grown past due for cutting. A strong jaw, roughened with stubble, and eyes so blue they startled her even from yards away. Lillian brought the wagon to a stop and fought to steady her breathing before words came. ___quote_0___. The man came down the porch steps with an easy grace that contradicted his size. She judged him late 20s, carrying the kind of weathered handsomeness earned by years working beneath the open prairie sky. "Quote 1, he said. His voice ran deep and warm, like honey stirred into tea. Quote 2. Heat rose in her cheeks. She became suddenly aware of how she must look after weeks on the road. Quote 3. Warren asked gently, and something in his tone pressed against the whiteness in her throat. __quote_4___. She did not understand why she was unburdening herself to this stranger, but something behind those eyes invited truth. Warren nodded, slow and deliberate, then gestured toward the wagon bed. __quote_5___. Relief washed through her as she climbed down, legs unsteady from hours of sitting. Warren was there at once, hand extended to help her. She took it, felt the calluses on his palm, a mirror of her own. His grip held firm but careful, and he let go the instant her boots met the ground, though she thought something shifted behind his eyes as he did. She led him to the back of the wagon and drew the canvas aside, revealing 7 quilts folded beneath. Each one a masterwork of color and pattern, the kind of labor that consumed months. A wedding ring design in shades of blue and cream. A log cabin pattern built from warm browns and reds. A star that seemed to shimmer in golds and whites. 4 others, equally beautiful. Warren reached out and touched the top quilt's fabric with a reverence she had not expected. "These are extraordinary," he said, voice low. "Your mother was indeed remarkable. I learned from her, who learned from hers. Each stitch placed with love and care." Lillian heard the tremor in her own voice and cleared her throat. I am asking $12 apiece, though I know that is dear. Warren looked at her with those piercing blue eyes. How much for all 7? Lillian blinked, certain she had misheard. Sir, all 7 quilts. How much would you take for the lot? Her mind worked fast, numbers falling into place. $84 would clear the last of her father's debts, give her enough to start fresh somewhere new, perhaps one of the growing cities where a woman might find respectable work. __quote, _12, __, she heard herself say, offering a discount she could barely afford, because something in her wanted this man to agree, wanted these precious pieces of her mother's legacy to remain together, in a place where they would be valued. Warren did not pause. $84 is what you asked originally, and $84 is what they are worth. I will not cheat you, Miss Parker, even if you are willing to cheat yourself. The kindness in those words nearly broke her composure entirely. She watched him lift each quilt from the wagon with care, handling them as though they were spun from glass rather than sturdy cotton and batting. He carried them inside, making several trips while she stood by the wagon. Uncertain of the protocol for such a situation, when he emerged from the final trip, he drew a leather wallet from his pocket, counted out the money with deliberate care, pressed the bills into her hand. His fingers brushed hers, and warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Miss Parker, he said. Something almost hesitant lived in his voice, at odds with his confident bearing. It is late in the afternoon, and you have travelled far. Would you stay for supper? I have a cook who prepares far more food than one man needs. It would be a pleasure to have company at the table. Lillian knew she should refuse. Propriety dictated that a single woman should not dine alone with a single man, especially not in his home. But she was tired, so very tired. The thought of one more meal of cold beans eaten beside her wagon felt unbearable. More than that, she found herself wanting to stay, wanting to know more about this man who bought all her quilts without haggling, who looked at her as though she were something precious rather than a nuisance. I would be honored, Mr. Yates, she said softly. A smile transformed his face. It reached those blue eyes, creating crinkles at the corners that made her heart skip. Warren, please, and let me help you stable your horse. She looks as tired as you do. They worked together in comfortable silence, unhitching the mare, seeing her settled in a clean stall with fresh water and hay. Warren's barn was immaculate. It spoke of a man who took pride in caring for his animals. Lillian counted at least a dozen horses in the stalls, all healthy and well tended. 18? She asked as they walked back toward the house. He spoke with such warmth that she found herself smiling. Warren held the door open for her. She stepped into a house far nicer than she had expected. Polished wood floors, furniture sturdy and well made, touches that spoke of a man trying to build a home rather than just a place to sleep. Books lined shelves in the parlor. She spotted a chess set on a small table by the window. She asked, gesturing toward the pieces. He led her through to a dining room where a long table could seat 12 with ease. As if summoned by her name, a plump woman in her 50s emerged from what must be the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She stopped short when she saw Lillian. Her eyes widened with surprise and what looked like delight. Mrs. Henderson's face split into a genuine smile. A pleasure, Miss Parker. It is about time this house had a lady in it, even if just for a meal. I will set another place and bring out the good china. Please do not go to any trouble, Lillian protested, but Mrs. Henderson was already moving back toward the kitchen, humming something low and satisfied, the sound of a woman very pleased indeed. Warren gestured toward the stairs. There is a guest room where you can freshen up if you like. I imagine the road dust gets into everything." Lillian followed him up, painfully aware of his presence just ahead of her. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his hair curled slightly where it met his collar. He showed her to a pleasant room. Washstand and pitcher, a mirror above it, a window that opened onto prairie, stretching flat and endless toward the horizon. "Take your time," he said. "Supper will not be for another half-hour." When the door closed behind him, Lillian sank onto the edge of the bed and tried to steady herself. Her hands trembled as she poured water into the basin. She caught her reflection in the mirror and winced, hair escaping its pins in wild tendrils, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, her dress rumpled and coated in dust. She did what she could, washed her face and hands, repined her hair, brushed the worst of the grime from her dark blue traveling dress. It was not much, but it was better, and she found herself caring more than she should about how she looked when she went back down those stairs. Warren waited in the parlor. He had changed too, she noticed. A clean shirt, a jacket that fit his broad shoulders like it had been cut for him alone. He stood when she entered. His eyes warmed with something close to admiration, and her pulse answered before she could stop it. "You look lovely," he said. Simple, sincere. The plainness of it struck harder than any elaborate flattery could have. "Thank you, and thank you for your hospitality." "You did not have to do this." "I know," he said, moving to pour them each a glass of what appeared to be lemonade from a pitcher on the sideboard. "But I wanted to. It is not often I have the pleasure of interesting company." He handed her the glass. She sipped it gratefully, tart sweetness cutting through the dust still lining her throat. They settled into chairs by the window. For a moment, comfortable silence held between them as they watched the land bathe itself in golden light, the sun dropping low toward the horizon. "How long have you been on the road?" Warren asked. 3 months. I started with 22 quilts, all that my mother had made over the years. I sold them one by one, sometimes 2 to a family if they were prosperous. Each time I let one go, it felt like losing a piece of her all over again. She had not meant to say that much, but something about this man made her defenses fall away. "And after you sell the last one, what then?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I thought perhaps I would go to Kansas City or even further east. Find work as a seamstress or in a shop. I can read and write and do figures, so perhaps I could keep books for someone. I have not let myself think too far ahead because it frightens me, the uncertainty of it all." Warren leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes intent on her face. "What if you did not have to go anywhere? What if you could stay here?" Her breath caught. "I do not understand." "Great Bend is a growing town. We need teachers, shopkeepers, seamstresses. A woman with your skills and education could build a good life here. I own several buildings in town that I rent out. One of them sits empty right now, a small place that would be perfect for a dress shop or a quilting business. I would rent it to you at a fair rate, nothing you could not manage with your skills." It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. Lillian felt tears prick at her eyes. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I know what it is like to be alone and struggling. I came here 5 years ago with nothing but the money I had saved from years of working other men's ranches, taking the jobs no one else wanted, saving every penny I could. I was 23 years old and determined to make something of myself, but it was hard, harder than I can easily explain. If someone had offered me a hand up instead of a hand out, it would have made all the difference." Before Lillian could form a reply, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway. Supper was ready. They crossed into the dining room. fine china caught the chandelier light. Silver gleamed against white linen. The meal carried no pretension. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans pulled from what had to be a kitchen garden out back, and bread still warm enough that steam rose when Lillian broke it open. They ate. They talked. And somewhere between the first bite and the last, Lillian found herself saying things she had never spoken aloud to anyone. Her father's farm in Missouri, her mother's quiet grace, the way her father reached for the bottle more and more after her mother passed until the bottle was all that remained. She told him about the debts. The farm sold out from under her to settle them. The long months on the road afterward. Nothing for company but her own thoughts and her mother's quilts folded in the wagon bed. Warren listened the way few men do, with his whole attention fixed on her words. He asked questions that proved he was tracking every detail. Not politeness, genuine interest. When it came his turn, he spoke of growing up the youngest of 5 sons on a Texas ranch. Not enough land to split 5 ways, not even close. He had left at 18 with nothing but determination and spent the next 5 years working harder than he thought a body could endure. 46, he said. His voice dropped low, tight with old conviction. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every horse standing in that barn. Years of labor given form. Lillian said. The warmth in her voice surprised even her. __quote, _50, __. The evening stretched long past what was proper. Lillian noticed with a start that full dark had settled outside. The windows threw back their reflections. 2 people sitting close in lamplight. She should leave, return to her wagon. But her body would not rise from the chair, and the man across from her made leaving feel like a kind of loss she was not ready to accept. Warren read her hesitation without her speaking it. __quote, _51, __. Lillian knew the correct answer was no, but months of hard ground and wagon boards had worn her down. A real bed. The thought alone weakened her resolve past breaking. Quote, 52, quote, 53, Warren said. Something in his eyes, steady, warm, unhurried, made her believe every word. Mrs. Henderson materialized as though she had been listening for exactly this outcome. She was practically glowing as she led Lillian upstairs. Fresh nightclothes appeared, soft cotton that must have belonged to Warren's mother or perhaps a sister. They smelled of lavender. Mrs. Henderson helped Lillian unpin her hair and brush it out, long strokes that loosened the tension of the whole day. That Mr. Yates is a good man, Mrs. Henderson said, working the brush through a stubborn tangle. Best employer I have ever had, and I have had a few in my time. Fair, generous, never once raised his voice at me. Always says please and thank you, like I am doing him some personal kindness rather than the job he pays me for. She paused. But he is lonely, that one. Big house like this. No one to share it with. Heat crept into Lillian's cheeks. __quote, _57, __quote, _58, __. Mrs. Henderson caught Lillian's gaze in the mirror. Her smile carried decades of knowing. But I am an old woman who talks too much. You rest now. Tomorrow will come soon enough. After Mrs. Henderson pulled the door shut behind her, Lillian climbed into bed. The feather mattress swallowed her whole, soft as mercy after so many nights on frozen ground. She expected to lie awake. Her mind was too crowded. The day's events. The confusing pull that Warren Yates stirred somewhere deep in her chest. But exhaustion won before a single thought could finish forming. She woke to sunlight cutting through the window glass. Coffee bacon. The smells drifted up from below like a summon's. For one disoriented breath, she could not place herself. Then memory flooded back, and with it, a nervous flutter low in her stomach. She dressed quickly in her own clothes. Someone had brushed them clean and folded them on the chair while she slept, and made her way downstairs. Warren stood in the dining room with a newspaper spread before him, coffee steaming at his elbow. He rose the moment she crossed the threshold. Quote 60. Quote 61, she admitted. Quote 62. They settled into breakfast, and Lillian found herself studying Warren over the rim of her cup, noticing what exhaustion had hidden from her the evening before. The way his hands, broad, roughened by work, cradled the delicate china with surprising care. The way a strand of dark hair fell across his forehead when he leaned toward the paper. The way lines gathered at the corners of his eyes when he smiled at something Mrs. Henderson said, bringing out another plate of bacon. After the meal, Warren offered to walk her through the ranch. She accepted without hesitation. They moved through the barn together, and he introduced each horse by name, told her their temperaments, their habits, their small rebellions. There was Silver, a grey mare, gentle enough for children. Thunder, a bay stallion, spirited and proud, Warren's personal mount. And a young colt, still learning manners, still testing boundaries. I am trying to build a reputation for quality horses, Warren explained as they watched the colt prance circles in the paddock. Not just working animals, horses with the temperament and training to be trusted in any situation. It takes time and patience, but it is worth it. You have a gift with them, Lillian observed. Even the skittish colt settled when Warren drew near, his voice dropping low and steady. My mother used to say I was part horse myself, the way I preferred their company to people when I was young. He offered a self-deprecating smile. I have gotten better with people over the years, but horses are still easier in many ways. They do not lie. They carry no hidden agendas. What you see is what you get. They walked beyond the barn to where cattle grazed on open range. Red and white shapes scattered across the grassland, stretching to the horizon. Warren pointed out his property lines. The creek that ran year-round. The line shack where hands sheltered during roundup and calving season. It is beautiful, Lillian said. She meant it completely. Something about the vastness of the prairie, the endless sky pressing down, made her feel both small and woven into something far larger than herself. It is home, Warren said simply. The way he looked at the land, with such quiet pride and deep affection, made Lillian's heart squeeze tight. They returned to the house as heat settled over the day, and Warren laid out the proposition he had mentioned the previous evening in more concrete terms. He produced papers showing the building in town he owned, a 2-story structure on Main Street, shop space below, living quarters above. The current rent was modest. He offered her the first month free to get established. __quote _70___, Lillian said, even as part of her ached to say yes. Quote 71, quote 72, quote 73, he corrected gently. Quote 74, quote 75, she said, her voice barely rose above a whisper. Quote 76, quote something passed between them in that silence, a recognition that this arrangement carried weight beyond commerce, beyond convenience. Lillian saw it in Warren's eyes, felt it in the way her own pulse quickened when he smiled. Very well, Lillian. Do we have a deal? She took the hand he extended. His grip warm, strong, and she felt as though she were stepping off a cliff into open air. We have a deal. The days that followed blurred together in a rush of activity. Warren drove her into town to see the building, and it proved even better than she had dared hope. The shop space was generous and well lit. Tall windows that would display her work beautifully. The living quarters above were cozy and clean. A small kitchen, a bedroom, a sitting room. Everything she needed. News travelled fast through Great Bend. A seamstress and quilter was setting up shop. Before Lillian had even opened her doors proper, women appeared. They introduced themselves. They asked about services. They lingered. Warren helped her order fabric and supplies through his own business contacts. Got her prices she never could have managed alone. "You do not have to do all this," she protested one evening. They sat together, going over invoices in her new shop. "I know I do not have to. I want to." He looked up from the papers. Those blue eyes held no lightness in them now. "You must know by now that my interest in your success goes beyond that of a landlord." Lillian's breath caught in her chest. They had been circling this thing for days, the way their hands found reasons to brush, the way a simple conversation stretched into hours without either noticing, the way she caught him watching her when he believed she was not looking. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He stood, came around the table to where she sat, knelt down so their eyes were level. He paused, drew a breath. Tears sprang to her eyes. Not grief, not pain, relief, joy. She whispered. Warren reached up, cupped her face in his hands. His thumbs moved gently, wiping away the tears that had spilled over. She nodded. Words would not come. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, sweet, full of promise. Something inside Lillian that had been locked away for years flew open, letting in light and warmth and hope she had forgotten existed. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. __, quote _89 __. His voice was low, rough at the edges. Lillian said. She laughed through her tears. The weeks that followed were the happiest she had ever known. Her shop opened to immediate success. Women came from town and the surrounding ranches. Simple mending, elaborate dresses, custom quilts. She hired 2 young women to help with the simpler work, taught them the skills her mother had taught her, found deep satisfaction in passing on that legacy. Warren courted her with a sincerity that made her fall more in love with him each day. He brought wildflowers from the prairie, took her on picnics by the creek that wound through his property, taught her to ride so they could explore the land together on horseback. They played chess in the evenings, games stretching for hours as they talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds, each other's hearts. The people of Great Bend watched their courtship with approval. A certain matchmaking pride settled over the town, as though every last soul had played a hand in bringing the couple together. Mrs. Henderson was particularly pleased. She went out of her way to create opportunities for them, always properly chaperoned, but with enough privacy for meaningful conversation. 3 months after Lillian had first driven up to the Yates ranch, Warren took her back to that same porch where they had met. Summer had given way to early fall. The air carried that particular crispness that spoke of changing seasons. He guided her to the railing where he'd stood that first day. Her wagon track still marked the dirt of the drive, faint but visible. "Do you remember when you came here?" Warren asked. His arm circled her waist. It felt natural. It felt right. "I remember being terrified and trying not to show it. I remember thinking you were the most handsome man I had ever seen and being embarrassed by the state I was in." He laughed, rich, warm, unhurried. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, traveling alone, selling your mother's quilts to survive. I remember wanting to help you, but not knowing how without seeming presumptuous. He paused. And I remember the moment you smiled at me, really smiled. It felt like being struck by lightning. We have come a long way in a short time, Lillian said softly. We have, and I want to go further still. Warren turned to face her fully. His hand reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. Lillian's heart hammered against her ribs as he opened it. Inside, a gold ring, a modest sapphire, beautiful in its simplicity, circled by tiny diamonds that caught the light. His voice steadied. Lillian said. Her voice came strong and sure, despite the tears streaming down her face. Lillian set the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her hand alone. Then he was kissing her. She was kissing him back. The world fell away until nothing remained but the two of them and the love that bound them together. They married 6 weeks later in the small church in Great Bend. It seemed like the entire town filled the pews. Lillian wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple white cotton with delicate embroidery that had consumed every spare moment to complete. Warren wore a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual, though Lillian thought he would have looked perfect to her in anything. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Several of Lillian's customers dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception unfolded at the ranch. Tables stood outside under the autumn sky, laden with food the women of the town had contributed. There was music and dancing and laughter. As the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Warren swept Lillian into his arms for their first dance as husband and wife. Happy, he murmured into her ear as they swayed. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, she replied honestly. When I drove up to your ranch that day, I was just hoping to sell a few quilts. I never imagined I would find a home, a husband, a whole new life. I bought all your quilts so you would have to stay longer, Warren admitted. A sheepish smile crossed his face. I told myself it was because they were beautiful, which they are, but really it was because I did not want you to leave. I wanted more time to convince you to stay. Lillian laughed in delight. You did not need to convince me. I think I was half in love with you before I even stepped down from that wagon. Their life together settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. Lillian continued to run her shop. She found deep satisfaction in her work and the financial independence it gave her. Warren supported her business wholeheartedly. He never expected her to give it up just because she was married. He understood it was part of who she was. They worked side by side on the ranch when she had time, Lillian learning the rhythms of cattle ranching and horse breeding, Warren sometimes joining her in the shop to help with heavy lifting or bookkeeping. Partners in the truest sense, each respecting what the other brought. The big house that had felt so empty when Lillian first saw it began to breathe like a true home. They decorated it together. Lillian's quilts graced every bed. Her touch showed in the curtains she made, the cushions she embroidered, the small comforts that transformed cold space into something warm and lived in. Warren built her a sewing room, the finest light in the whole house pouring through tall windows. He installed shelves for her fabric, a wide cutting table where she could spread her projects without compromise. Their first winter together came down hard. Snow piled against the walls. Temperatures dropped well below zero. They barely noticed. Wrapped in each other, wrapped in the warmth of what they had built, the cold stayed outside where it belonged. Long evenings by the fire, reading aloud, chess games that stretched past midnight. conversations about futures they could almost touch. Underscore underscore, quote underscore, 109 underscore underscore, Lillian said one night. They sat curled together on the sofa, flames dancing in the fireplace, shadows moving soft across the walls. Warren asked. His hand moved gentle through her hair. Warren said, pressing his lips to the top of her head. Lillian replied. Spring arrived, and with it, news. Lillian was expecting their first child. Warren came apart with joy and worry in equal measure. Suddenly he saw danger in everything. He wanted to wrap her in cotton wool, shield her from the smallest risk. She tolerated his overprotectiveness with amused patience, kept working in her shop until her growing belly made standing at the cutting table too long an ordeal. Mrs. Henderson took on more household duties, freeing Lillian to rest when her body demanded it. Still, her hands stayed busy, stitching baby clothes, piecing together small quilts. The women of Great Bend gathered around her. Advice and gifts and offers of help flowed steady, forming a community of support that made Lillian grateful all over again she had landed in this town. The baby came in early December, a snowy day. The world seemed hushed, holding its breath. Labour stretched long, and Warren paced the floor downstairs, while the doctor and Mrs. Henderson tended Lillian above. When he finally heard that cry, thin and sharp and unmistakable, he practically ran up the stairs, burst through the door to find Lillian exhausted but radiant. A small bundle rested in her arms, wrapped in one of her mother's quilts. "A son," she said. Her voice was tired but full. "We have a son, Warren." He approached the bed with something close to awe written across his face, looked down at the tiny red features of his child. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." They named him William, after Warren's father. The boy proved to have his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. Warren was devoted from the first moment, changing nappies, walking the floor at midnight with the baby against his chest, singing off-key lullabies that made Lillian smile through her exhaustion. The years that followed ran full and rich. Lillian's shop continued to thrive, managed now mostly by the women she had trained. She focused on custom work from home, stitching between caring for William. Warren's ranch grew more prosperous each season. His reputation for quality horses spread across Kansas and into neighboring states. When William turned 2, Lillian gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Grace. They carried their father's blonde hair and their mother's gentle disposition. Underscore underscore, quote underscore, 121 underscore underscore, Warren joked, but he would not have traded a single day. The big house echoed with children's laughter, exactly as they had dreamed. Never a quiet moment under that roof. 2 years after the twins came another son, James. He proved the most adventurous of them all, giving his parents grey hairs before he could even walk properly. And finally, when Lillian was 32 and believed they were done, came sweet little Sarah. She completed their family. The children grew, learning the value of hard work. They helped on the ranch and in their mother's shop as soon as they were old enough to be useful. Warren taught them to ride, to care for animals, to read weather in the land itself. Lillian taught them to sew, to read, to find beauty in small things. She pressed into them the worth of education, kindness, integrity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Warren led Lillian back to the porch where they had first met. The children were with Mrs. Henderson, who at 70 moved slower through her duties, though her devotion to the family had not dimmed one shade. Summer had come around again, the same season when Lillian had driven that dusty road with a wagon stacked full of quilts, and a heart torn between hope and terror. Warren asked. His arm rested around her waist as they gazed across the land they had shaped into a life. Lillian turned to study her husband, this man who had shown her what love truly was, who had stood behind her dreams while they built new ones side by side, who had given her a family, a home, a life far beyond anything she had dared imagine that desperate afternoon she rolled onto his ranch. She said, her voice steady as iron. Warren said, drawing her closer. 127_. They stood together as the sun bled low, much as they had on countless evenings across the years, comfortable in each other's silence, certain they had found something rare and worth protecting. From the house came the sound of their children laughing, the living proof of everything they had made together. As years kept turning, the Yates family became a pillar of Great Bend. Warren took a seat on the town council, using his success to help others find their footing, the same way he had once helped Lillian. She taught sewing to young women, passing her mother's skills to a new generation. Her custom quilts became treasured heirlooms in homes scattered across Kansas. William grew into the horse breeding operation, carrying same quiet gift with animals his father possessed. The twins, Emma and Grace, both married local men and stayed close to home. Emma opened a bakery. Grace became a teacher. James, true to his restless nature, went east to study law, but came back to practice. The land and family pulled too strong for him to stay away. And Sarah, their youngest, proved to carry a mind for business that impressed even her father. She eventually took over management of the ranch's finances and its expansion. Warren and Lillian watched their children grow and raise children of their own. Grandchildren filled the ranch, learning to ride, sew, to love the land just as their parents had. The big house that once felt too large for a single man became the gathering place for a sprawling, noisy, loving family. On their 40th anniversary, everyone came to the ranch,